Welcome to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I'm Jason Whitlock, your host. Happy Thursday. Thank you so much for joining me. Man, we are going to put the fearless back into fearless today. This will be one of my favorite shows. I'm so looking forward to sharing this conversation with you. This is a conversation that's been a constant theme on this show. There are these racial hoaxes that are being executed in America, and it goes well beyond Jussie Smollett. It goes well beyond Bubba Wallace. It goes well beyond almost anything you could imagine. Racial hoaxes are driving much of the American narrative, much of the decision-making that has gone on with law enforcement and law and order and safety in this country. And we're going to get to the bottom today, or begin a discussion today, about one of the greatest racial hoaxes that's been pulled off in recent years, and it's related to Breonna Taylor. Say her name, Breonna Taylor. People don't like talking about it. People have been, oh my God, you'll pay a terrible price in the social media world, in the Matrix, and in corporate America if you go anywhere near the truth about what happened to Breonna Taylor on March 13th, 2020, or was it March 12th, 13th, 2020. I'll get the date absolutely correct here in a second. But if you go anywhere near the truth of what happened, that Kenneth Walker, her then boyfriend, got her killed. And we just had the recent ruling from the courts where the federal criminal charges were thrown out against the officers that were there that night and who shot, unfortunately, Breonna Taylor. But the murder charges, the criminal allegations, the federal criminal allegations were just thrown out by a federal judge who said the exact right thing. Kenneth Walker killed Breonna Taylor, not the police. He put his woman in harm's way because he's a coward, because he acted in a cowardly fashion, because he acted in a criminal fashion. That's why Breonna Taylor is dead. One of the officers, that was shot by Kenneth Walker, who set off the events that took Breonna Taylor's life, John Mattingly, here in studio with me today for an incredible conversation that I'm predicting we will have. John's written a book, 12 Seconds in the Dark, that goes into great detail about what happened that day and what happened in the aftermath and all the cowardly decisions that led to putting him and his fellow officers in harm's way and made them a target. We're going to get into all of this. It's important that we understand how these racial hoaxes are being used to drive division and being used to drive decision-making that puts us all in harm's way, that makes us all less safe, that ends up empowering criminals and criminal activity rather than protecting law-abiding citizens. First, before we bring John on, I want to thank First Cup Coffee. Today's episode is brought to you by First Cup Coffee, a Christian-owned patriot coffee company that stands for core values, family, and building community across the nation. First Cup's freshly roasted beans are delivered in ground or whole bean, pods, and bulk. Go to firstcup.com and use the code FEARLESS and save an additional 10% on your order. If you subscribe, you save an additional 10% for the life of your subscription. Thank you so much, First Cup. Thank you to all of our sponsors that allow us to have the kind of conversations that we're going to have today. Before I bring John Mattingly on, I want us to watch the promo of his book just to warm up the conversation. Then we're going to bring John into it. Let's play the promo.
It was very chaotic. It was very quick. Instantly, I knew I was shot. Breonna Taylor, she was caught in the crossfire of those bullets. As soon as your brain's registering, it's already over. The media got so many things wrong in this case, saying we had the wrong apartment, her name wasn't on the warrant, she was shot and killed in her sleep in her bed. These are lies. This is not true, and all the while you're hearing all these outside influences from athletes and Oprah and Ellen DeGeneres and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, all those people coming and attacking you, putting your name on their account saying he should be in prison, all these things that they have no idea what they're talking about. But they have such influence. The more we attack police for doing their job, the less good qualified police you're going to have. When you read 12 Seconds in the Dark, you will find out the truth of what really happened the night of the Breonna Taylor raid.
I suggest everyone read that book, but I think after you listen to this conversation, I'm not going to have to make that suggestion. You're going to want to go read the book and find out for yourself what happened in Louisville, Kentucky in early March in 2020, before George Floyd. But George Floyd is connected to this. But John, thank you for coming over to Nashville and sitting down for this interview. I want to start there. I want to start with George Floyd, because the Breonna Taylor thing happened several months before George Floyd, and it was kind of under the radar. And then George Floyd happened, and it like reemerged in the conversation and turned into this say her name national controversy. If not for George Floyd, do you think your life would be dramatically different and people would have moved on from the Breonna Taylor case?
Well, I think if it hadn't been an election year, a lot of this wouldn't have taken place, because we've had incidents since then, similar or of the same quality, and you don't see that explosion. So we were in March. It was March 13th is when it actually happened, on a Friday, March 13th, full moon. And then in April, you had Ahmaud Arbery. And when that took place, we weren't getting any attention, which I was more than satisfied with because of COVID. Every day, president was on, the governor was on, talking about toilet paper and hand sanitizer. So crime stuff and police weren't really a thought then. But then Ahmaud Arbery happened. It got national news, and Ben Crump jumped on that. The civil attorney for Breonna Taylor, she went to law school. After law school, she interned for Ben Crump in Atlanta. So she said on TV that she called him and said, "Hey, we've got a black victim here that was killed by a white cop. It's not getting any national attention. Can you help us?" Well, Moneybags Crump said, "Oh, sure, man. I'm seeing dollar signs, right?" So that's when you started saying, if you run for Ahmaud, run for Bree. That's when the say her name kind of popped back up. So that gave it some fuel and some legs. But then when George Floyd hit, things just totally exploded and went sideways for our family and for our city.
So in the initial aftermath of March 13th, there weren't major protests in Louisville. There was no rioting. There was no organized effort.
Correct. There was none. And then the first night, I think it was May 27th, after the George Floyd thing, that's when our city totally exploded. We had 7 people shot that night, the very first night in our riots. And then a couple of days later is when the outsiders started coming in. And that's when things really picked up, and that's when things started to get destroyed and burned, more so than just protesting. So you had outside influence come in a few days later. It was obviously organized because they were getting bussed in, handed money when they got off the buses. People had those in videos, and it was amazing how quickly these things were organized. They were bringing U-Haul trucks in, unloading with water bottles and objects and things they could use.
And so you, on March 13th, early morning, you're part of a group that's serving a warrant in a drug investigation that's tied to Breonna Taylor. Her former ex-boyfriend, Jamarcus Glover, seems to be someone that was definitely a drug dealer. Mm-hmm. He was at a different location. There were warrants executed there at these other without incident. And this ancillary search warrant, it seemed like most people weren't expecting much trouble.
Right.
That's the one that explodes because, you guys are knocking at the door. You're saying that you're identifying yourself as police. And Kenneth Walker, and Breonna hop out of bed, and they fire a shot that hits you in the leg. Mm-hmm. And so before we get into the specific details, I definitely want you to retell that story, but in the aftermath, when a cop is shot, you're somewhat of a hero, and your superiors, the people in politics, are initially treating you like a victim and a hero. Is that not accurate? And then eventually you become toxic and radioactive, and they pivot weeks, months later to you're the bad guy.
Yeah, something happened, and I'm not sure when it took place, but it was fairly quickly, even though the news wasn't big. So I spoke to my chief the day after for about an hour in my room. It was just
Your hospital room.
correct. My hospital room was just he and I. It was a 5-hour surgery, repairing the femoral artery that was severed during the shot. Fortunately, tourniquets do save lives. And so he came in and I told him everything that took place. He had all the details of that night, which isn't recommended to people, but for some reason it was just like recorded in my head like a DVD. So I wouldn't recommend it to everybody, but I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. And so I told him the events of that night. I haven't talked to him since. I only talked to one lieutenant colonel.
Hold on. You're shot on March 13th. You talked to him on
March 14th.
March 14th. And then you've never spoken.
Never spoken
What's
to
his name?
Chief Steve Conrad was his name.
He's no longer the chief?
He was eventually fired. Then an interim chief brought in. Then later on we'll talk about the other chief that came in.
So did you try to reach out to him? Is that unusual? Were you in more regular conversation with him or expecting more conversation
I
with
was
him?
expecting more from command staff in general. The only person that stood up for any of us was my major over our unit, over our division. And because of that, she got threatened by the DOJ that she's interfering with investigations. She got demoted.
Who is this?
Her name is Kim Burbrink. So she got punished for stepping in, just simply asking questions like, well, how come you haven't looked at this part of the investigation? Why aren't we putting this information out, the truth? And because of that, she got smacked down. And I only talked to one lieutenant colonel maybe a week after the incident, 2 weeks after. Other than that, I've had zero radio contact with the chief's office.
Did I not read also, didn't the mayor visit you in the hospital?
He came the day of, or the next morning, so it was still the 13th, but he came in. Really weird conversation, because he's not a police fan anyway. We hadn't even been under contract in, I think, 5 years at this point, because he just didn't work well with the police. We were always the necessary evil for the city.
This is Fisher.
Yeah, Greg Fisher. Yeah, very progressive Democrat,
But he does come visit you that night.
He does, out of obligation. That's just the norm. Anytime a police officer's shot, they show face. It's all political stuff. So yeah, that was.
And did you had a conversation that you remember with him? Did he say anything to you, or?
It was just weird. He came in and he said, I'm glad you're doing well. He mentioned something about my youngest child, so he knew I had a young one at home. I have 3 adult children, and I had a young one at home at the time. And then he made some other comment, but it was just real standoffish. And I made a joke, because this is March, and Derby's coming up in May. And in Derby and Louisville, all police had to work, right? You work in 12-hour shifts around the clock. You just had to, that's just the way it is, because it's a manpower-intensive deal. And so I jokingly said, at least maybe I won't have to work a Derby detail this year. He went, don't worry, we'll get you back for that. And that was it. And that was about the extent of our conversation. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, a minute. It was short.
So what's interesting here, though, is very early on, they started to pivot. Even before the controversy took off, they were already running for cover?
Yeah, so early on, the mayor did get on TV, early on, and talking about we need justice for Breonna Taylor. And I kept asking people, what is justice? Can somebody define justice for me? Because that's such a loose term thrown around, because your justice is different than my justice. So somebody just tell me, what is justice? Could never get that. But as soon as he started saying stuff like that, I knew things were going to go south. Because ever since Michael Brown, it used to be when a police officer was involved in a shooting, you call your buddy and go, man, what happened? Is everybody all right? Was it a good shoot? That was it. Now you call people and go, you're holding your breath going, was the suspect black or white? Hoping they're not black, praying they're not black, because you don't want the issues in your city. And so that changed after Michael Brown. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way. It should simply be, was it a good shoot, period. But once that happened, every time one of these incidents happened, things could just go south.
Michael Brown, I believe, is 2014.
Correct.
So just for the audience and for my own just timeline, you joined the police force in 2000 at the age of 27?
Correct.
And so we were talking a little bit about just the history of how policing in Louisville changed and how policing nationally changed. And you actually said that Louisville was one of the leaders in...
One of the flagship programs for Obama's 21st century policing.
And that is around 2014 as well?
That's when it kind of came to light to us on the street, because we didn't know at first. It's not like it was advertised, hey, we're going to do this. They just implemented it, and then it kind of trickled down, and people caught on, and word got out.
And so that change means what? Because I'm reading your book, and you've already talked about one female officer or lieutenant that treated you well, but I did notice, like, man, they had a lot of women, it seemed like, in power within the Louisville Police Department.
Yeah, I don't know if that was specifically related to that or not, but yeah, we did bring up a lot of female, and it seemed to be a lot of promoting people of color. And it wasn't, we're still, I think, below the national percentage for 13% nationwide, and Louisville's got 22% black population.
Yep.
So we're above the national average. So it'd be natural for us to have a little bit more, but I don't know what, brought some of these things on, because you see people get promoted and you're going, man, that don't belong. They were a horrible street cop, they were a horrible sergeant, horrible lieutenant. Now you're making them a major over division. They're going to screw that up too, and most of them did. And I'm not talking about black. I'm just talking about people that they're little puppets that they bring up that they know is going to do exactly what the mayor says. Because we used to have captains, which was a civil servant position that ran divisions. And when Robert White came to us in 2003, when we merged from city and county, he did away with that because you can't control the captains like you can control a major. When you put a major in a division, they're not a civil servant protected position, kind of like the female I was just talking about, Kim. When she got promoted to major, that's not a test taking, an oral interview, a chief's interview panel that you normally go through. That's simply the chief looks out and goes, I want that person, I want that person. They get it approved through the mayor's office, and they bring them up in rank to run something.
How does a captain work?
So captain's promoted through the testing process, and he's protected under contract through the FOP. So he can't just get demoted. You have to have reasons. You can't just say, well, you didn't do what I said, so now you're back down to lieutenant. They basically ran their divisions like little police departments under the guise of the standard operating procedure, which worked a lot better because each division in a city covers a different area that has different needs. Your super poor areas have different needs than your gated community areas. So, and when you run them all exactly the same, things just don't work properly.
It's like Walmart coming in and running out the local, and you start wondering why the service isn't as good. And
Right.
Next thing you know, you're talking to someone in India when you call customer service, rather than perhaps your next door neighbor that has that job. And so the major sounds more political,
It's
whereas
100% political.
Captain is more.
And they were really smart because captains were generally your older guys, man. They had 25, 30 years experience. They were seasoned. They knew how to talk to the community. And they had ownership in their division, right? Because they had to answer to community leaders. And they couldn't blame it on the chief or the mayor. The buck stopped with them. And now the majors, they're promoting them at like 12, 13, 14-year guys that have a long time to go before they can retire. And now it becomes, they want to hold on to that title. They want to hold on to that money because, it's the after retirement jobs that matter to those guys. The higher you climb, the better job you're going to get after retirement.
So let's go back to March 13th. And just from your perspective, you're a sergeant. Were you in charge of the Viper unit, or?
At one point, I was a sergeant in the Viper unit.
Gotcha.
We were no longer there. I was in narcotics at this point.
Imagine if you had the ability to just wave your hand and abortion would no longer be legal. Imagine all the lives you could save in that moment. Tragically, that's not the reality we live in right now. But the good news is you can save unborn lives by donating to PREBORN, the ministry of PREBORN empowers young expectant mothers in crisis to choose life. PREBORN has rescued hundreds of thousands of babies' lives through ultrasound. When a woman considering abortion visits a PREBORN center, she gets to hear her baby's heartbeat and meet that precious child on ultrasound. And it's a divine, life-changing encounter. The majority of times, she will choose life for her baby. I'm proud to be affiliated with an organization that's not only working to save lives, but is succeeding at doing just that. We can't shut abortions down overnight, but we can work together to change the hearts and minds of expectant mothers by introducing them for the first time to that young life growing inside of them. Will you help rescue babies' lives? To donate, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 keyword baby, or give the way I prefer to give. Preborn.com/fearless. What happened on March 13th from your perspective?
Well, when we went to the door, they asked us to knock and announce. It was originally signed as a no-knock warrant. That's where that confusion comes in. That's where the politicians jumped on our back to get their agendas passed and named it Breonna's Law, and Rand Paul named it the Justice for Breonna Taylor Act. And I'm thinking, Rand Paul, come on, dude. But, he's a libertarian, so he'd been wanting these no-knocks done away with for a while, and he found the perfect opportunity in us and used us for it. So that night we went, and they said, knock and announce, because Jamarcus Glover's no longer he's not at this location. We've got a tracker on his car, ping on his phone, cameras on the locations. He's going to be down on Elliott Avenue, not on Springfield. And so I said, that's fine. They said, matter of fact, she's a heavy-set black female. Give her extra time to come to the door. Because generally on search warrants, the Supreme Court says give them a reasonable amount of time, which is about 5 to 10 seconds, is what the general rule of thumb was. You knocked and announced for 10 seconds. If they didn't come to the door, you breached the door. So we gave it extra time. We go up and we knock, and we give this thing a minute of knocking and announcing, which when you're standing at a door knocking and announcing for a minute, not knowing what's on the other side, it feels like an eternity.
And so someone may hear that and think, well, that's not a long time. But when you're a police officer and again, 5 to 10 seconds for someone to answer the door and people's mind don't comprehend, that's actually a significant amount of time if you really think about it. But continue with what happened.
Well, going back to that real quick.
Yeah.
There was always play in that too. So if in that 5 to 10 seconds, if you hear someone coming to the door, you waited for them.
Yep.
It's easier for them to open the door as opposed to breaching a door. So that wasn't always just, now the time's up, boom, let's hit it. There's a lot of fluidity that's involved in this. So after about a minute, no answer. My lieutenant says, go ahead and hit the door. The breacher hits the door. When it comes open, I'm standing on the left of it. He's on the right of it, the breacher, because the door's opening from right to left. So I'm on the outside of the door.
Breacher's the person with the batter ram
Correct.
That's knocking the door down.
Right. So when he hits it, he gets out of the way. The door opens from right to left. I'm on the left side of it. Before I step in the door frame, I can see everything in the living room that my vision can see from right to left. And then I run out of space because they're down a hallway. And so as I step into this doorway to look down this hallway, my brain's going, something's off here, because it's dark. You have the TV ambient light coming out. We do have our gun lights. So as I'm coming around and circling, I see two objects down this long narrow hall. One's taller than the other. And my mind's going, this is weird, because I've done about 1,000 search warrants at this time, made entry on them. And normally people are giving up, they're hiding, or they're running. There's never two people down a hall just in wait. And by the time my mind's registering this and I get my gun around to them, I see the tip of Kenneth Walker's silver gun, and it's too late. Boom, the shot's fired. I feel the impact on my leg. I return 4 rounds and get behind the door. He dives into a room as soon as he shoots and leaves Breonna in the hallway. She attempts to follow him in the room because her feet crossed the threshold of the door, where she then fell back. So she ran into the line of fire, chasing this guy who had abandoned her in the hallway.
So there's 20 some odd shots fired in, or 30 some odd shots fired in return. That's something sounds excessive to people who have never been shot at. To me, it sounds like, I've been shot. Someone's been shot. I'm not counting how many bullets I'm firing in return. I'm just responding.
Yeah, to give you an idea, you can unload a 16 round. Our guns had 15 rounds and one in the chamber. So you have 16 bullets in your gun. You can unload that in about 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's over. That's 16 of them. And you had 3 people shooting. So I shot 6, another guy shot 16, the guy on the outside shot 10. So you had those bullets done within seconds, maybe 8 seconds total. So it was very quick.
Is there anything that you guys second guess and think we should have done different?
Oh yeah, looking back, originally when I did my first interview, I was still in this fight and flight mode, right? Because my family was still being threatened and all this, and I just wanted to get the word out. Now, initially I said, I would go faster. I would either execute it as a no-knock or do the normal thing we did, because that gives us the advantage. It does not give Kenneth Walker time to wake her up, put his pants on, get his gun from his nightstand, and then be out there waiting for us. There's no way. And so initially that was it. But looking back, there are other things we could have done. The main thing that a lot of SWAT tactics use now is surround and call out, or breach and call out, where you either knock on the door and announce you're the police and have them wait for them to come out, or you breach the door And once it's open, you don't make entry, then you call them out. So we were never trained on that. Our SWAT started that in 2017. We were just reactive teams. We were search warrant teams, not SWAT. And so we were never taught on that. And our SWAT commander had gone to the chief's office, Conrad, a couple of times saying, hey, we need to teach our other entry teams this practice. It's safer. It's what a lot of police are going to around the nation. And Conrad said, no, we don't have the manpower or the money to train them. So that was 2017. Now we're here, we did it this way. Another error we made was we used to, this isn't policy, this was just kind of a thing because we talked earlier, we don't want to get shot. We're announcing police because, hey, we're not breaking in, it's the cops, don't shoot, don't shoot. It's one of those deals. Well, it used to be we would bring a marked car with us because everybody goes, oh, they were in street clothes. We weren't in street clothes, we were plain clothes, but we had tack vests with police on it and our badge. We were probably more visible than a guy in a dark uniform with a single badge on his breast. So, but we still want people to know we're the police because we don't have any marked cars. So it used to be we would bring a marked car up, and as we're banging, saying police search warrant, this marked car out front hits its lights and sirens to let the community know it's the police. You know, nothing's going on here. Once manpower issues started taking effect a few years back, we would call the radio room, try to get a car, and they're like, man, they're holding 20 runs. These guys are gonna be tied up for the next couple hours. Well, at some point you got to move, right? You got to take your plan of action and go forward with it. So at some point along that way, we kind of strayed from that, and it would have really helped on this op.
So people have debated whether you knocked, whether you identified yourself. It seems like neighbors have said, hey, we didn't hear him shouting police or whatever. I've always argued from the beginning. In 2020, you can probably find video of me saying like, no, that would be insane for them not to identify themselves. Because if they don't identify themselves, they're inviting someone to shoot at them. Their number one protection is to identify themselves. So if you knocked and if you assumed that Kenneth Walker had to know that, hey, these are the police, what would motivate him to fire that shot?
Well, the only thing I can think of, I'll give him benefit of the doubt or play devil's advocate, whatever you want to call it. I think they heard us. I honestly do.
Well, that's why they got out of bed.
Yeah.
And put clothes on.
But I mean, I think they actually heard us announce as well.
Yeah.
But when they downloaded his phone when they did a search warrant, he has a text thread in there talking about doing a home invasion with some guys worth $20,000. He said, I always do my homework. Well, we've had this in Louisville, and I'm sure they've had it in other cities where guys get tack vests. Anybody can get a tack vest. You can get it online. And they go to these doors, opposite drug dealers or gang members. They bang on doors, yell police, and they'll raid a house like the cops. Like a kid will open the door, a girl will open the door, and they'll force their way in, tie people up, and rob them. I don't know if that was his MO. I don't have any proof of that. But that's known on the streets. So did he think somebody was coming back on him for a previous act he had done? He originally said he thought it was Breonna's other boyfriend, Jamarcus Glover, the guy who was the target. He thought he was coming after him because evidently they had some words because Breonna was still talking to Jamarcus, still talking to Kenneth. She had just bailed Jamarcus out of jail in January of 2020 where he got popped on a search warrant with drugs and 7 guns and heroin and cocaine and all that stuff. And she gave her address as his and his phone number as hers. So she was still tied in with Jamarcus.
His familiarity as someone who potentially, according to his cell phone records, maybe was involved with home invasions is what set off his cynicism. Mm-hmm. It's like, this sounds like the kind of thing perhaps I would have done. And did his cell phone records, because other than reading in your book and you telling me this, I wasn't aware of this information that in his cell and text message information was him kind of ratting himself out about the kind of criminal activity. Is that well known? Is that something the police?
No, the police haven't put anything out. So when they originally came out and said, oh, they had the wrong address, she was asleep in bed, the boyfriend was in custody 10 hours earlier, talking about Jamarcus Glover. When they came out, they didn't find anything. When they came out and said all that, I kept pleading with the police department, put something out. We can put the cover sheet of the warrant out that says her name and her address, and it will not it won't hurt the investigation. Because had we had body cams, the policy was 24 hours those body cams were released in a critical incident. Well, why can't we release the cover sheet of a search warrant to prove we were at the right place at the right time? The boyfriend wasn't in custody because these warrants were served simultaneous. He was taken into custody as we were in the middle of this chaos on this scene. So the reason they didn't put it out, I have no idea. We couldn't get any answers. They just said they did not want to, how'd they word it? We don't want to, for future investigations, we don't want to set precedent. That's what they said. We don't want to set precedent for future investigations. And I'm thinking, well, you guys do what you want when you want anyway. You know, the rules change for command than the beat guys. It's totally different. So just put the truth out and save the city. It would have been much easier.
Kenneth Walker and Breonna Taylor, and I don't want to gossip and smear or whatever, but reading your book and then doing other research, these weren't the innocent victims that the media has told us that, like, you know, hey, Kenneth Walker's just a law-abiding gun owner, and, you know, he's got this girlfriend, and she was this EMT, and, you know.
Well, let's clear up the EMT part, okay? She hadn't been an EMT since early 2017. She was only in the business for 5 months. She never even got off probation. She was fired from EMT with a no rehire clause in her file. Apparently, she didn't show up to work a lot. In 2017, there was an investigation where she had rented a car. There was a dead body found inside with a bullet in the head. So there was a lot of things going on in her life that she never even made it off probation. So she wasn't a decorated EMT. The little picture they show you wasn't current. And again, that's not bashing her, because these drug dealers, they're predators. They take advantage of these women who were raised in homes that weren't ideal. Her dad's been in prison her whole life. Her mom didn't raise her grandma did. And so they look for those, and they prey on them, and they give them money, or they give them fake love, or they give them whatever. And these girls are kind of indebted to these guys, and one will hold the drugs, one will hold the money, one will do something, you know, rent the cars for them, hold stuff in their name, and that's just the way that whole thing goes. Now, she was involved, so that led to these consequences, but I don't want to put her out there as this, you know, evil individual, because I don't think that was the case.
So Jamarcus Glover, her previous boyfriend, he was the main target of the drug investigation.
We didn't even know about Kenneth Walker.
Totally shocked that he was there.
We were.
Yeah.
Now, later came to find out that the investigative team that was doing this, that we were doing the warrant for, had seen him there the day before and ran him and did a little background on him and knew he had a concealed carry, and they just didn't share that information with us. Why? I don't know. It was a mistake.
So, but there is, and I've seen a lot of this reported, Breonna Taylor's involvement with Jamarcus Glover ongoing in terms of, seemed to be involved in his alleged criminal activity, holding money for him, maybe him picking up packages at the address she lived at. Walk us through some of that.
Yeah, so the package deal, because that's a big sticking point in this thing. The guys that got the warrant for her address, they had reached out to try to find out if any packages were going there in Jamarcus Glover's name. Now, anybody that's done drugs any amount of time knows if I'm getting drugs mailed, and let me tell you, UPS, FedEx, and the Postal Service are the biggest traffickers in the country. Not on purpose, but they are. Okay, you can go out to UPS in Louisville, it's the main hub for the country. Any given night, pull 25 packages, if you know what you're looking for, and fill up a table full of drugs. We did it once a week, so I know it's there. And if you're going to have it though, none of these guys had it sent in their name. They would some fictitious name to a girl's house, to grandma's house, to vacant properties. Then they go get the dope and take it. And that's what happened here. Jamarcus showed up one day, and I don't know if it was drugs, but they've got him, pictures of him coming in empty-handed, going to her apartment, coming out with packages, going straight to the trap house. So I don't think he was picking up tennis shoes, you know, anything like that. But there's no way to say that. So that was one of the factors. Another thing is they've got her on video taking him to the trap house. So she's down there where the drugs are being sold with him on several occasions. He's used her car on different occasions to go do drug deals. So her involvement was there.
She's not an innocent victim. She's again, the previous incident with the dead body in a car rented in her name. And so that's not to say that she deserved
Absolutely not.
what happened, but it is to say that if you date drug dealers, get involved in their activities, you are putting yourself in harm's way, and it doesn't. The relationship with her and Kenneth Walker seems a bit romanticized as well. And we keep calling people girlfriend and boyfriend and maybe they're just hookup partners.
Yeah.
And then they have some type of business relationship as it relates to, but you know, I think the Kenneth Walker is on tape from jail.
I think it was day 2. Second day he was in there. He's trying to have phone sex with a girl.
This is on March 15th,
Yeah.
we should say.
Right.
Yeah, because initially he does get arrested for shooting you.
Correct. Initially took
He
him
was
in.
shooting a cop used to be a crime.
After he came out on tape on somebody's body cam and said she shot. So he brings her.
That's the night of.
It's the night of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he brings her out, you know, in the first place, brings her out of the bedroom instead of saying, man, somebody's breaking in, call 911. Nobody called 911. You know, the stuff you see on national news, you hear him, oh man, somebody killed my girlfriend. They're like, he called 911 when the police were at the door. No, he called 911 6.5 minutes after she died, after the incident happened. So we're banging on the door for a minute. He gets up, gets dressed, brings her out, and then instead of telling her to stay in there, then he dives out of the way and leaves her hanging, and then he blames her for shooting us. So this guy's character and word means nothing to me. But then the second day in, trying to have phone sex with a girl that he knows, a Hooters girl, or another girl. About 2 weeks later on another phone call, he's talking to a different girl saying he loves her and he's gonna marry her when he gets out. So there's not like this thing they put out where they bought these little Jordans after the fact and said, well, this was gonna be our kid's first shoes, and I got a ring for my grandma, I was gonna give her to marry me, and that's all just fairy tale.
I want to deal with that 6 minutes after she shot, he calls 911.
Right.
I thought that was a critical point in your book because there's so much commotion outside at this point, so many sirens,
Right.
so many cars, so many things that, like, he knew it was the police at this point. After 100%. She's been shot, there's no way. There's too many. But he calls 911 as if he doesn't know that it's the police.
Yeah. Well, he called his mom first, talked to her for about 2.5 minutes. Then he called 911. Then he called Breonna's mom. And then there was at some point, there was a 3-way between Breonna's mom and his mom on that call. And then at about the 16.5 minute point, he comes out.
I need to understand this. He calls his mom?
Mom first.
Is that after she's been shot or
Yes.
before he's been shot?
Well, that one's after. There were 4 phones in the house, okay? They all had active services. The only one they did a search warrant on was the one that he had on his person when he came out. The only one they did what's called a historical data, which shows who you called, when you called them. They only did it on Breonna's phone and his phone. They didn't do it on the other 2, at least that we know of. The FBI has those phones. They refused to give them up.
Calls his girlfriend's been shot, and his first call is to his mother.
Right.
The second call is to 911?
Correct.
And then he calls her mother?
Yes.
And then they have a 3-way. And this all, how is he, that he's shot you, how is he in the house for 15 minutes? First the initial 6 minutes and he calls the 911, but an additional 9-10 minutes. How is he shot a police officer? How is he not immediately apprehended? How is he in the house for 15 minutes?
Well, at that point, it becomes a tactical case where you wait them out because the incident's already taken place and you don't want another cop shot. You don't have to shoot somebody on the inside if you don't have to. I didn't know at that point, I didn't know until I woke up from surgery if anybody else was shot in the house because everything happened so quick, and it was, once you start shooting in the dark, it's almost like a strobe light.
Yep.
You know, it's very hard to see and get back on target. So I didn't know anybody had been shot until I woke up. Those on scene didn't know if anybody had been shot inside. They just knew somebody was in there. So they waited, and he finally came, and after he came, SWAT showed up and they cleared the rest of the house.
And so part of the narrative or the story is, well, they didn't find drugs. And that's how the whole they're at the wrong house thing happens, is because, well, they didn't find drugs. And part of my thing is, like, well, the guy had 15 minutes to clean up.
Yeah.
And it's like, I need an explanation for what he did during those 15 minutes. If I were a criminal, if I had drugs and I had 15 minutes to clean up, I would clean up.
Absolutely.
When does he come out and say, because I think I've seen this video before, this is shortly after he comes out where he's tells someone excitedly or nervously that Breonna, am I right? This is on the night at the scene of the shooting, is when he tells someone that Breonna actually shot?
Yeah, so he was kind of like, you could tell he was thinking, trying to come up with a story, because they were asking him, who shot? Whose gun was it? They're kind of asking those questions, and he's kind of deflecting, and he goes to something else, and he comes back. Then he said, she shot, she was scared. Because he said something about, well, it was her gun, her place. And one of the cops right there said, wait a minute, so who shot? And he said, it was her, she was scared. So.
I want to go back, I want to pause for a minute and pivot back into a little bit more about you.
Okay.
And we'll circle back to, because there's more fascinating stuff that went on with Breonna Taylor, but I want people to understand who you are, because this is where the book starts. You actually walk through your own personal background growing up in Louisville. And, you know, one of the first things I was like, oh, this guy grew up in the hood. You know, you're this racist cop that's never been around black people, but
who happens to have 2 biracial grandbabies.
We'll get there. Walk us, how did you grow up?
So my dad is a minister. He's a pastor. He took a church, a dying church in the black end of town when I was 4 years old. And this church, or when I was just born. And so he took this church, everybody said, don't do it, don't do it. There's white flight, everybody's left the area, because back then, I guess that was a thing in certain areas. White flight happened in the early 70s. And when that happened, he's like, no, I'm taking it, this is where I'm supposed to be. And so he built that church up to where they had to leave that particular end of town. And they still went. It's in the West End. It's all in the West End, but there's different neighborhoods. So he left that neighborhood and came to the Portland neighborhood, where they bought an old Maryhurst, which was a Catholic compound for troubled girls. It's on 11 acres down there in the ghetto. And they had left because of the same thing. And so I lived down there in Portland for, all my childhood except for 2 years. We moved out for 2 years and we moved back because it's too far from the church. And so I was playing ball at the park with all the thugs. I saw the drug dealers. I saw people get shot. I saw all the injustices, and that's kind of what planted that seed in me to go, I can't stand these guys. I can't stand them, I can't stand the actions. I hate seeing people get taken advantage of. I can't stand watching these poor kids whose homes I'm seeing the extension cord going from one house to the other for electric, but then they're coming out in their Jordans and a pocket full of money because there's this one guy down the street that all the kids would go hang out at, and they'd sell all his drugs, and everybody knew it, and nothing was being done about it. So those type things kind of put me in a trajectory of number one, seeing my dad help people. So that kind of instilled it in me. But then on the other hand, seeing all the injustices and what I could do to help, that kind of laid the groundwork for me being a cop.
And so in high school, in grade school, you're got friends of all ethnicities.
Oh yeah.
And
our church was very integrated too. It was at least the standard, maybe more of maybe 25% black. And so I had my Sunday school teachers were black. I had a lot of good influence from good people from all ethnicities. And I also saw the negative stuff on the street from all sides. Not just black, but I saw a lot of white thuggery taking place where I grew up. It was a lot of the whites were the bad ones.
And so at 27 or 25 or 20, you joined the police academy, joined the police force. What type of work were you doing early in your career?
The first 5 years I was on late watch, which was midnight to 8 shift. And I got to see a lot of, it was like a Cops episode every night, man. It was just fun. You know, you're new, you're working. Even though I grew up in the hood or in the ghetto, it's like once you're on the street and every run is that, it's still opens your eyes to stuff you thought you'd seen, and every day was something new. So it was exciting, it was fun, and did that for 5.5 years.
At what point for me, this was important reading your book, the Viper unit, for someone like me that used to love the TV show The Shield and the Strike Unit, I was like, man, I'm reading this like, oh, this is like the real live Strike Unit.
Well, it was.
When did the Viper unit and your role in that, what was the Viper unit? What type of work did you all do?
So in 2012, our crime rate in the city, the violent crime, had started to climb. Homicides started to go up. We had a street crimes unit previously, and due to public pressure, they said it was too aggressive of a unit, and they did away with it in the city. This was probably 5 years, 6 years prior to starting the Viper unit. So now that crime is getting out of hand again, you didn't have that one particular unit that could go anywhere in the city or in the county and hammer down on that. They said, we need to do something. So they brought the Viper unit. They started it, which was basically a street crimes unit that they brought back, rebranded it, renamed it, because they can never admit they're wrong, right? They can never went, oh, we screwed up there, we should have kept it. So we went after violent criminals, gangs, homicide suspects, shooters, robbers. That's who we went after, the worst of the worst in the city. And it was an exciting time. It was the hardest I've ever worked in my career. I thought for sure, if I'm gonna get shot or have to shoot somebody, this is it. And there was a couple of times I got shot at. I was next to people who had to shoot people, but fortunately for me, I got through that 3.5 years pretty unscathed.
So in your 20-year police career, you're only shot once. How many times did you have to shoot at someone? Did you ever?
The only time that was the only time I've had to shoot at someone. I've been, again, beside people who I just didn't have the shot, or I didn't see what's happening over here and it takes place. I've had friends shot. I was fortunate, I've been shot at. I've been cut up by glass through doors when I've been shot at before, but this is the first time I've been shot and had to shoot my gun.
What would you say to people that said that being a part of the Viper unit and the kind of work you were doing perhaps hardened you, and you've seen too much, you've been involved with policing the worst of society for so long that maybe it desensitizes you?
I think policing changes anybody. I don't care who you are, because after a while you get a little callous to stuff. You do get, if you're not careful, if you're not guarded, you get a little jaded at the world, thinking, you know, all the negative. But I was fortunate early in my career, because I was already married and had 3 kids, 3 little kids. I mean, from one was just 6 months old at the time, and then a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. So I wasn't hanging out with the guys. I didn't build a cop base of friends. I kept my old friends. And that was key in my life, because I'm not going out drinking with these guys. And now we're talking, you know, you got all this negative stuff at work you see and you hear. And a lot of it's not the street. It's the administration that puts all that negative feeling in your mind and heart. But then I'm not going out with people after work and having that negative conversation, keeping all this negative input in my life. I was able to detach from that and have my normal life. I wasn't known as a cop. I was known as John. You know, I didn't want to be that guy. And some guys are that way. But I didn't want to be that way. So I think that helped me in this. And I don't think, if anything, I think growing up in the community I grew up in, I had more empathy, I think's the word, because I understood that a lot of these people grow up in this, they're not asking for it. I remember I think it was my first year on, I was riding in the projects, and it's like 2:30 in the morning, it's hot like it is now, and I'm riding around, people pitching dice over here, people, you know, see the cops, they're hoo-hooing and they're hiding, they're doing different things, and I look over and see this little kid, maybe a year and a half old, little black kid, and his diaper is down to his knees. And that's the only thing he's got on. And he's out there running the courtyard where these dope dealers are and these guys doing dice and stuff. And I'm thinking, even though I grew up where I grew up, when I saw that, something clicked in me. It went, man, that kid don't have a chance. Now we know ultimately he will. There's opportunities. But I can see how he's so behind the 8 ball from a young age in life, running the streets at, you know, a year and a half old, seeing the stuff that no kid should see. And that kind of gave me right then an empathy thinking, okay, I'm going to go maybe the extra mile to try not to judge people out of the gate.
So doing the math, if you joined the police force in 2000, you're 27, that makes you around 51 years old now. And so you have older kids that are old enough to have kids, or and you have a daughter that's married to an African American.
Well, she's with him, yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And y'all,
They've been together since he was 14 and she was 13. She's 28 now, off and on together. But then they got together once they had their first child.
And they have 2 kids that,
Correct.
And so, you know, because it's such a stupid question, a stupid way of just looking at life. But I do have to. How did you feel about your daughter partnering with a black man, having 2 kids?
My outlook on that has always been, as long as you treat them right, I don't care. As long as you're a good human, I don't care if you're black or white. If you're white and you're a piece of trash, I don't want you dating my daughter. If you're black and a piece of trash, I don't want you dating my daughter. If you're a good person, I'm good with you. One of the best men in my wedding is a black guy who's a good friend of mine. Been friends for 20-something years, 24 years. And so the qualms and the accusations that came at me through this, that probably initially pissed me off the most. People call me racist. I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, of all things to call me, don't call me that. And I know it was the low-level fruit, the easy thing for people to do to get people's emotions all riled up, but that one stuck with me a little bit.
Americans are hurting. Healthcare costs are out of control, and we know insurance companies don't have the answer. But now, LAASY Health is here to shake things up. That's LAASY, L-A-A-S-Y. LAASY Health isn't health insurance. It's access to the health care you want without all the red tape, restrictions, and inflated costs. Coverage starts at just $30 a month. You get transparent pricing, comprehensive coverage tailored to your needs, and access to healthcare services without breaking the bank. There are no annual or lifetime caps on services, and you can start a plan at any time. For only $30 a month, you get over 400 prescription medications for free. Free, unlimited virtual mental health counseling. Free, 24/7 virtual urgent care. Lab tests up to 60% off. Imaging tests up to 75% off. And over 50% off all procedures and surgeries. You can even get plans with vision, dental, primary care, and comprehensive health share coverage. People are saving thousands on everything from MRI scans to ER visits, hospitalizations, and more. And here's the bonus. High blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes aren't considered pre-existing conditions as long as you haven't been hospitalized in the 12 months before you enroll. LAASY Health is a game changer. Check out affordable plans that put you in control of your health care at healthylink.com/fearless. For a limited time, get your first month free. That's up to $100 off eligible plans. So get healthy, be healthy, and stay healthy without breaking the bank at healthylink.com/fearless. The other thing that stuck out to me in the book is I got to a point where you were talking about this Colonel Gentry that I think was your boss. It was a black woman.
Right.
And you talked about she had your back and had a vision for the community, and you guys were actually making an impact in the areas that you were policing. And then she retired and got replaced, and things went a completely different direction.
Totally. So all of a sudden it became, we were having such great results. I remember the homicide sergeant who'd been there for like 15 years comes to us when we were handing off a suspect to him like 2 hours after a murder. And he's like, dude, how do you guys do this? So he said, all my years here, we've never been able to turn these cases over so quickly. And I was like, dude, it ain't me, number one. It's these younger detectives working with me. They understand social media. They can lure these guys in. They get it. I'm just the one holding the reins, trying to keep people from getting indicted or killed. So it wasn't me being a great police officer, it was these guys. But in that, once that changed, once Gentry left and this new bosses came in, they folded to the public because we were aggressive. We didn't violate law, we didn't violate policy, and that's what Gentry told us. As long as you don't do that, I'll have your back. If you do that, you're on your own. So we knew the guidelines and we stayed within them. And because we were aggressive, people didn't like that, right? People don't like to be caught, especially if you're doing wrong things. And so when they came in, the community leaders came to them and said, oh, this is new leadership. we got some complaints. They're policing the black community too hard. They're policing this area too hard. And the areas we went were based on intel. We have informants all over that were like, hey, this dude's getting ready to shoot somebody, or this guy shot somebody, this guy's got guns or drugs or whatever. So we used that to go where we went. It wasn't just like, oh, we're just crap shooting in the black community, hoping we hit, throwing against the wall and hoping something sticks. That's not the way it works. And when they came in, they bowed to these community leaders, and suddenly we had guidelines on, okay, you can police on that side of the street, but we've agreed that you all won't go in this neighborhood or on this side of the street. And I'm going, but what if crime is there? Why are we not going? We're paid to go where crime's at, not what these community leaders wanted. Then they gave us these cards we had to hand out every time we stopped somebody that was basically, if you don't like the way you were treated, call this number. Complaint cards. And I'm like, this is getting too much for me. So I end up leaving that unit because it became so touchy-feely for a unit that was supposed to be, the tip of the spear going out, getting the hardened criminals.
And that's what all of this, when I talk about, I started the show talking about racial hoaxes and how they've changed policing, and how they're changing the criminal justice system. And it's difficult for anybody to defend law enforcement without getting shouted down and, you're an Uncle Thomas sellout, or you're a racist bigot or whatever. But that does seem to be the result of what it's like. The criminal justice system now seems to really go overboard in favoring the criminal rather than backing law enforcement. And people are actually, a guy that's been convicted of dealing drugs, using drugs, committing all kinds of crimes, his word is more credible than law enforcement.
Right.
And this is crazy. And so I want to play a clip for the audience of a woman named Erica Shields, who they put in charge of the Louisville Police Department, I believe in January of 2021.
Yeah.
So January of 2021.
I'm still working for her. I'm an officer underneath her watch at this point.
Yeah. And so this event, Breonna Taylor, happens March 13th, 2020. They end up with this female police chief, who I think came from Atlanta.
Who screwed the Rashad Brooks case up.
Yeah. They bring her to Louisville, and this is her at her first opening press conference, March 13th, 2020. This is what she says on January of 2021 about Breonna Taylor.
Breonna Taylor was at home in her apartment in bed, and the police came into her apartment, and she ends up dead. And it's like, that didn't have to happen. And imagine, and this is where it's race reckoning. This doesn't happen to white people. It just doesn't. And it was heartbreaking. And I'm a cop, okay? And I get how difficult the job is. But what I would say to police is, if we really are doing this fairly and impartially, why is this not happening in white communities? And don't tell me that it's because the black people where the crime is, the black people where the violence is. That's crap. And if you're going to police fairly and equitably, your practices have to be consistent and your standards have to be consistent regardless of the neighborhood. And LMPD is by no means alone in this.
The standard at some point has to be, if you shoot a cop, expecting someone to shoot back, particularly if you hit them. And
regardless of color.
Yes, regardless of color. And the inference of that, like no white people ever get shot by police, it's just not factually true.
No. And if she had taken 10 minutes to do her homework, she could have pulled the warrants our units did and looked at the race breakdown on that and seen the Hispanic and the white and the black and been like, okay, and it's in this end of town and we've been in this end of town. We didn't pigeonhole anything to black in that end of town. Plus, the shooting didn't happen in the black community. It happened in a very mixed community, mostly white, you know, where the apartment was. And I get what she's saying, a black person, but she said in the black community. So she just had so many things wrong, and they had months of interviews, and so she had the information on hand. She's just trying to appease the liberal community in Louisville.
And so that type of press conference, day one, hey, this is my new boss. That's got to have a chilling impact on the rank and file law enforcement.
Oh, 100%.
And it makes them, if I don't understand why anybody would sign up to be a policeman in this environment, but I certainly wouldn't want to be black or white policing a black community in that environment with that leadership.
Yeah, it sets you up for failure. And no matter what you do, you're damned. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
And so
there's no win.
People, if I was a cop, I would turn a blind eye. I would be less likely to support people in need, because it's like, if I run in there and try to do my job, I'm actually putting myself in harm's way.
Well, haven't we seen that since 2020? That's why
Yes.
crime has skyrocketed. They'll lie because people aren't reporting to the FBI the crimes, but crime's way up. In Louisville alone, since 2020, we've averaged about 175 homicides a year in a city less than 1 million people. Over 800 shootings a year. That's way above what it was before 2020. But because we've relaxed standards, we've let people out. You talked earlier, our situation should never have happened. Jamarcus Glover had 6 pending felony cases for drugs and guns over his head, and they just kept letting him out over and over and over. Had he been in jail where he was supposed to be, Breonna would be alive. So you can take this back even from Kenneth Walker at the scene, Greg Fisher initiating the investigation, to the courts letting him out when he should have been held accountable for his actions previously. You know, all these are factors that came into play on that tragic night.
So Kenneth Walker has to acknowledge he shot first. And everybody, there's plenty of evidence that the bullet struck you. You had to have surgery, and it actually was a potentially life-threatening ordeal. And at the very least, you could have lost your leg. I think people kind of think it was like some little surface wound.
Graze.
Yes, it was like Trump's
Half the people
ear.
don't even know. Half the people, when they report it, never even say a police officer was shot or that Kenneth shot first. A lot of the stories you read never even mention that. So they assume police showed up, went in, and just started shooting people. That's the mindset a lot of people have.
So when did you, March 13th, this happens. We've already kind of discussed, people come in on the late 13th and 14th, and then you never hear from your colonel. When did it cross your mind, hey man, this may turn into a really big deal that's problematic for me?
Well, the initial was when I woke up from surgery, my wife comes in, and I said, was anybody hurt? I knew my guys weren't, because when I'm on my back and they're working on me, I'd kind of accounted for everybody, so I knew everybody, the cops were safe, but I had no idea in the apartment. And she said, yeah, somebody was killed. And I said, who? And she said, I don't know, but it was a female. Well, then my heart sank, because I knew a female didn't shoot me. I knew I couldn't have picked him out of a lineup, but I knew the much taller individual was the one holding the gun. And so that pit in my stomach was like, that was my biggest fear as a cop. It wasn't getting hurt, it wasn't getting killed. It was hurting an innocent person that didn't deserve it. So that was my thought laying there, and I thought, oh crap, because what we talked about earlier, since Michael Brown, every police shooting, and I don't care, you could talk to cops across the nation, since that incident, after police shootings, cops are holding their breath hoping the suspect isn't black, because we don't want to shoot black people. We don't want to shoot anybody, but we really don't want to shoot black people, because we know you're going to be on Front Street after that, your family's going to be threatened, all of these things are going to happen. So when she told me that, I thought, crap, this is going to suck. This is not good. I said, but then COVID was such an overwhelming thing. That's the day that they shut down the country for 2 weeks to stop the spread, was March 13, 2020. That day, so that encompassed the news, right, for weeks. And so I thought, well, good, I might escape this. You know, this might go under the radar, and I'll go back to work, and nothing ever happened. Well, that was short-lived, because then I realized at that point I wasn't getting any communication from the police department. Mayor Fisher was starting to get on TV, and say stuff like, we need justice for Breonna Taylor. And when he was getting pushed by reporters, well, why are they still on the job? Why have you fired them? He said, well, I would like to fire them, but I can't because they're protected by the Police Officer Bill of Rights. So without any due process, he already wanted us and made it public that he wanted us out. So I knew some trouble was coming, but again, the city itself hadn't really taken off yet. And then Ahmaud Arbery happened, and it went from just a few people at the courthouse, her family, which, let me say this, the police department did them wrong as well, Breonna's family. They did not share any information with them about the case, just like they didn't share us, just like they didn't share with the media. So they're getting fed from attorneys, they're getting all this misinformation as well, so you understand why they're upset like everybody else is. And when Ahmaud Arbery happened, then their attorney reached out to Crump because she had done some internship with him and said, hey, can we get some attention here? So he got that going, he got the ball rolling there, and you could feel the tension building in Louisville. That's when some death threats started coming in on social media and on my phone in different areas. But then George Floyd, when that happened, man, things just, it was like a powder keg blew up.
But weren't you and perhaps your family sitting there, well, I'm just being real here, sitting there going, well, hold on, I got shot. So I'm bulletproof. I mean, a cop got shot. I had to have surgery. I could have lost my leg. I could have died. Maybe my co-workers will be in trouble, but the guy that actually got shot and returned fire, maybe the guy that was outside that shot through a window and, shot 10, 12 times, maybe he's in trouble, but I got shot. Was there any thinking like that? Like,
initially, I knew legally, I thought legally, I'm safe, right? But that doesn't keep you out of harm's way for the civil stuff or the threats and all that. And I knew that was a good possibility because you saw Darren Wilson down in Ferguson. He was cleared, he was good, but look what happened to him. He got drove out, the city got burned. So I knew that was a potential here. So that was always in the back of my mind. Then the longer this investigation drug out, our state attorney general did the state investigation. The FBI came in and did the federal. The state one lasted until the end of August, and it still felt like an eternity from March to August, because by the end of it, I'm like, look, if you're gonna charge me, just charge me. Just get this over with. I'm tired of every day not knowing when that hammer or if that hammer's gonna drop. And then the feds, man, they drug that out for a year and a half, 2 years, kept doing warrants on our Apple account, Google accounts. They were looking for anything, turn over any stone, just to try to find something to pin on somebody so they could get their pound of flesh for the public and say, hey, we did it right. But yeah, I always knew I didn't do anything illegal or immoral or unjust. And that caught a lot of ire when I said that previously, that what I did was not immoral, saving my life. I don't think that's immoral. So I thought I was good for a long time, and then all hell broke loose.
So this federal thing that just in the past week comes down, where hats off to the judge for finally calling BS, but how long had that been hanging over your head? What was at the center of those charges?
Well, see, that really didn't affect me as much as the guys who wrote the warrant. So the investigative unit, that's all referring to them. I'm glad he put that outcome, because that's what I've been saying since day one. My very first interview, I'm like, Kenneth Walker's at cause here. Had he not shot, nothing would have taken place. We don't just go shoot people for no reason. So, but what that goes back to is that package deal. So they've got, again, pictures going in, empty-handed coming out, but they wrote that line in the warrant wrong, saying the postmaster verified packages going there in Glover's name, and he didn't. So they lied about that. And they will be held accountable, and I'm fine with them being held accountable. They should. As law enforcement, we can't put stuff in warrants that isn't true. Did it negate the entire warrant? No, the Supreme Court's already upheld. If you've got enough probable cause, even if something's wrong, whether it be an address of it, maybe a factual part of it, if you take that out and the total ability of the warrant is still there and intact, that it's a good warrant. And so there was enough probable cause there. They worded it wrong, as opposed to saying they saw it and they went to the trap house. They took a shortcut and said that, and they're going to pay the price for it.
Do you that's tough? Do you think that's potentially did they need to tell that lie? Is that an innocent mistake?
I don't know, because the co-writer of that warrant, she did a proffer. So she met with them privately, and they said, anything you tell us in here, you won't be charged with. That's what a proffer is. Just tell us the truth. If we find out later any of that's a lie, we can come back and charge you for all of it. So she went in there on that proffer and told them that her and Josh, the guy, wrote that line in the warrant knowing it was false. And when it came out, the postal inspector saw that and said, I didn't say that. Naturally, I would too. You're using my name, I didn't say that. So when that blew up, Josh and Kelly, according to Kelly's statement, now the trial's next year, I'm curious to see what really happened because I don't know. But in her statement, she said her and Josh met in his garage that night once it got exposed, and they were going to blame me because they didn't think, what you said, that I would be bulletproof. If we blame it on him, he got shot, they won't do anything to him. So he changed his investigative letter, apparently, to saying I told them the package was going there. And there's text messages and everything thread that disproves all that. She's admitted that was all a lie. We knew and we did it anyway. So I don't know why they did it, other than that unit was very young and very inexperienced, and being pressured by the chief, again, by the mayor's office every week. They would come into our office and meet with them to get an update on this case to find out where it was. Because again, I think it was all for the gentrification of that neighborhood.
You're talking about a conversation we had in private that we need to have publicly. We talked about this on the phone in terms of the pressure that they were feeling to clean up these certain streets and why there was so much pressure on Jamarcus Glover and these streets. It was a gentrification
project.
Unpack that.
So in 2017, they had the University of Kentucky, the city did. City of Louisville had the University of Kentucky draw up plans for gentrification of the Elliott Avenue area, which is where Jamarcus Glover had 2 trap houses. And they had the plans drawn up with fountains and buildings and all this stuff to revive this area. In 2019, there's an email sent out showing a map of the streets, and it shows 2 houses on there. The rest are X'd out that the city had, and it said we need to get these 2 houses so we can complete. The owner of those houses wouldn't sell. You know, he's got a dope dealer renting them out, paying him cash every month. Why would he? So, because I'm sure the city was lowballing them. And so that was the target in 2019. Police didn't know about this. They created this new unit in January of 2020. It's called Place-Based Investigation. It's based out of a pilot program out of Cincinnati that was basically a surgical unit that was supposed to go in if Jason Whitlock's given us trouble in the city. If he's a problem and we can't get him, we're going to take this unit, we're going to focus on him and the crimes he commit, and you're going to put your blinders on. You're not going to do anything until Jason's in prison and that problem's solved in the city. Sounds like a good deal, right? That way you're not just, again, getting civilians that shouldn't be involved in these cases involved. You're getting the troublemakers. Ironically, the mayor's office said that Jamarcus Glover and his houses on Elliott were the very first target of this new group. Kind of funny. So I'm sitting in my office when they start this, and I'd been in narcotics since 2017, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I see a representative from the mayor's office, one of the assistant mayors or whatever they're called, second or third in line, come in, and 3 of our lieutenant colonels from the chief's office, and they're meeting with this crew. And then they did it the next week and the next week. And I'm sitting there going, man, in 20 years of policing and 14 of those being in plainclothes operation, doing warrants, doing investigations, I have never seen the chief's office, number one, be so concerned about an op. But I've definitely never, ever seen anybody from the mayor's office coming and getting updates. So, but I thought, you know, I don't know anything about that unit. Maybe this is something new. None of my business, whatever. But I knew something was off. You know, when you see something, you just know it's off. You're like, it's just weird. And then later we find out that that's why. They were coming getting updates. Hey, when are you going to do this? Where are you at on this case? Where are you at on this case? Because they wanted to move along with this gentrification program. That was exposed actually by the civil attorneys for Breonna Taylor. They exposed that, and they amended their lawsuit against the city and added that in it. And like 3 days later, in the middle of the night on a Sunday night, the mayor, the county attorney, and the attorneys for Breonna's family met and they settled for $12 million.
Oh, let me just give a little bit more context for the audience. Just make sure we're all on the same page here. They want to gentrify a neighborhood. Mm-hmm. They need to displace Jamarcus Glover and the business that he's doing in this neighborhood to make someone sell these two last properties.
Right.
So that's why there was so much focus on Jamarcus and this investigation. That's the driving force. And I mean, this is all such an episode of The Wire,
Yeah.
or a season of The Wire. This would be an incredible season. And so what ended up happening that night with Breonna Taylor and Kenneth Walker is just collateral damage from this gentrification effort. And once Breonna Taylor's family figured, oh, why was Jamarcus under so much investigation? Why did this all happen? And they're able to connect it to the mayor's office and this gentrification. That's why they gave Breonna Taylor's family $12 million to make this go away, because the mayor didn't want to be dragged into this. And
They want to go in deposition.
Yeah. Pointed at him. And so many people are like, well, they gave him $12 million. That must mean the city thinks that these police officers did something wrong.
Absolutely.
And it's actually CYA for the mayor.
If I were on the outside looking in and I saw that for months from people from the White House down are saying, oh, they had the wrong apartment. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are both on there during the debates in 2020 talking about it and how we went in and just murdered her and all this stuff. So you got that. You've got all these pro athletes. You got all these celebrities getting millions and tens and millions of views on these false allegations, and nobody in power, nobody with any authority is pushing back. We can't talk. We're not allowed to talk at this point. So there's nobody pushing back. And then you pay them $12 million. I would probably be on the outside going, they must be guilty. They got to be guilty. So again, those emotions are risen across the board. Logic goes through the floor, and people act accordingly.
What's so fascinating is how no one wants to unpack this story, because it's kind of a simple story.
Yeah.
And it really is a story that needs to be unpacked so that people actually understand how these cities operate, why things don't get done in certain situations. But no one has any interest in that. Everybody just wants the clickbait, the instant gratification, the simple racially divisive story, and the quick payday.
Yeah.
And so they settle with Breonna Taylor's family for 12 before the investigation is even completed.
Yeah.
To cover the mayor.
And you can't tell me that doesn't influence potential jurors on the criminal side of it. Because again, if I don't know any of the facts and I'm seeing this, my mind's made up probably. And then I go into these proceedings or these hearings, and especially in grand jury indictments, you can get anybody charged with an indictment almost. I mean, because you can't come in and defend yourself, you can't bring your attorneys in. All these things are in place for the prosecution side so they can get an easy indictment and then take it to court.
When I tell you all about these hoaxes, and this is a hoax, what's going on, and it's opportunists like Ben Crump, lining his pockets, connecting dots, smearing people like John Mattingly and others, all for a quick profit. Is like some of the details in this are amazing. And I want you to share the story of Donovan Duncan. Donovan of the Louisville Police Department at the time, maybe he still is, I'm not sure, but he actually lives in the neighborhood where Breonna Taylor was living at that time.
In the apartment complex, same one.
And did he go to high school with Kenneth Walker?
Went to middle school and high school with Kenneth Walker. Knew Kenneth Walker's mom. Still had him in his phone. Talked to him regularly in there. Talked to him regularly on the phone.
Donovan's talked to Kenneth Walker right before March 13th.
Correct.
You're talking about they were in regular communication.
Yeah.
He has a statement that's on camera.
Yes, sworn.
That says.
So Donovan Duncan was one of the ones that marched also with the protesters, wore his Black Lives Matter stuff, posted, "We won't rest until they get justice and there'll be no more cops shooting our people," and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So he did all that rhetoric after his statement over here because he didn't know the framing of this event. So he's the courtesy officer, which means he lived in the apartment complex that Breonna Taylor did, and he got a discount because he parked his police car out there and do some services for him. He said he was home, he heard some gunshots, turned his police radio on, heard an officer been shot there, threw his uniform on, did the right thing, threw his uniform on, came down to help. Well, by that point, he's on the perimeter of the scene. Earlier we talked, Kenneth Walker called his mom. She did what any mom would do. She came to the scene to see Kenneth, see what's going on. He said in that statement that when she got there, she knows him, so naturally she makes a beeline to him, and she says, I don't know what's going on. Kenneth called me and said, they're at the door. I said, who's at the door, baby? He said, it's the police, I gotta go. And that was never been followed up on, as to my knowledge, by any investigative unit at all. Again, was that phone call made off one of those other 2 phone calls on the nightstand? We don't know.
A police officer that lives in the apartment complex, that's friends with went to junior high with Kenneth Walker, sworn statement, talks to the mother at the scene that night. She tells them that she got a call from Kenneth that he acknowledges, the police are at the door, I gotta go. Mm-hmm. There's this whole dispute. The reason why this is critical, if you're not following too closely, is like, I didn't know that it was the police.
Yeah.
They didn't identify themselves. No one heard them knocking or, all this other stuff. The man called his mother and told him it was the police. It blows, and you got a law enforcement officer saying all this. And then this same law enforcement officer, you're saying, later joins the other side.
Correct.
And starts protesting, and Breonna Taylor is a total victim here. And so he saw which way the wind was blowing and changed with which, and I'm assuming by his name and the story you're telling, he's black.
Correct.
How much racial division is there within law enforcement in this new era, this new environment that we have?
Talking about on the department itself with each other?
Yes.
It's generally it's not there. There are some, but it's fairly still cohesive. From what I've been out of it for 3 years, so I don't know. I don't know what it is today. I don't know if it's progressed. I do know this story. So my good friend that's black, he was in my wedding. He's a cop also. He would tell me about a friend of his, who I wasn't a friend with, but was a black police officer, a traffic guy, and he would joke with me because we're very, very honest, open with each other. We can talk without getting offended.
Yep.
And he's like, man, so-and-so always told me in his career, the only thing he wants to do before he retires is shoot a white person. And I'm like, that's weird, because I've never had a white cop tell me I want to shoot a black person, ever. And so it's there, it exists. There's some tension at times. When I was over the beat guys as a sergeant, when I first got promoted, had a black guy on my platoon, had a couple of them, but this one in particular that was more sensitive. He was always kind of looking for that. There's an issue because I'm black guy, one of those guys. When the other guys didn't, they're on the same platoon, they're black, they had no issues, but this one guy always had that issue. He got into it with a couple of guys one day at the jail where they're dropping a prisoner off, and apparently they got pissed and left him because he was being an ass. And he comes back to the station, they only did it because I'm black, they did it. So I brought them all together. I'm like, did you do it because he's black? You just call him out straight in front of their face. And we got it hashed out, and it had nothing to do with it. It was an argument over some stupid thing that work-related that had nothing to do with race. But unfortunately, and the thing that was probably the most disappointing during this whole thing is that even guys I liked and thought, well, they're gonna be on my side because they're conservatives, but they're black, switched over because of the race thing. And they kind of joined forces because police do this to black people. And it was a little disappointing. And some of them are on some major, news channels. And so I was like, man, you kind of figure out where you fit in, because at the end of the day, a lot of people, maybe black and white, choose race over truth.
Well, we've certainly chosen race over our identity in Christ. And that's what we talk about all the time on this show, is if we all leaned into our Christian identity, it would clear up a lot of this mess. And so that's why they force us to lean into all sexual identity, gender identity, race identity, instead of our identity in Christ, and it just creates.
But it's weird. You grew up in the late 60s, early 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
My best friend when I was young was a black guy named Stephen Thompson. And I shouldn't even say this, but I'm gonna. When we were, I'm not kidding, 6 years old, 7 years old, we'd see each other and he'd go, "What's up, my honky?" And I'd say, "What's up, my?" Yeah, I mean, I would say it. Let's just, that's life. I'm not a liar. And we thought it was funny as little kids. And we just didn't really we didn't see color. That's how we were raised. And everybody gets mad now. Oh, you can't say you don't see color because, black is beautiful and white is this. And I'm like, no, we for real didn't see you as black or white growing up. You were just my friend, or you weren't. And then now this society, I'm scared for my youngest kid and my grandkids because I'm like, number one, where are my grandkids going to fit in? I'm like, what side are they going to have to choose? Or are they going to be strong enough to go, that doesn't matter to me, like everybody should be, mature adults should be.
It's what you're talking about is so real, and it's we're having a real conversation. You just said something that everybody can relate to, particularly if they've had friends across racial lines. What you're talking about, commonplace. It's commonplace to this day. Take Morgan Wallen, the country singer, gets liquored up, use the N-word like in a rap song, and everybody melts down like, oh my God, I can't. And we all know like, nah, that's what happens. You get liquored up, you like rap music, you're gonna say that word. No one thinks it's a big deal. No one thinks Morgan Wallen's racist, but we'll all play the game.
Right.
As if like, oh my God, can you believe that? And John Mattingly just sat there across from Jason Whitlock and let him know that he used to tell his friend that he'd say, hey, what's up, my and I don't like the word. I never use it or rarely use it. Don't like anybody black or white to use it, but I live in reality where I know the word gets used. We've spread it through rap music everywhere. Someone using that word doesn't mean that they're gonna kill you, harm you, have hatred in their heart for you. And so they've just created this fantasy matrix world. And that's when I look at this case and look at this fantasy that we've come up with where a man can be in bed and hear trouble at the door and think, yeah, me and my woman are gonna go get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
And really? And my initial thoughts, as soon as I heard that they both got out of bed and they put their pants on, and somebody put their pants on backwards, and my whole thought, just as a man, and I know I'm old and I come from a different place, I was like, what's this woman doing? And what's he allowing her to do? Yeah. There's trouble at the door. I'm a man.
I'll take care of it.
That's my whole job in life. And no one wants to talk about that. And then I certainly then don't go to the door and shoot indiscriminately, randomly. But everybody wants to live in this fantasy world where that's not a level of cowardice that's repulsive and sick and should be rebuked and shamed. Kenneth Walker, I don't like cursing. He's the biggest piece of shit in all of this. And that's just facts, and everybody knows it, but he got $2 million.
Yeah.
He got $2 million. He shot a cop.
Yeah.
The most fundamental principle of man, protect women and children, he didn't do it. He failed at that and shot a cop and got $2 million.
Well, one of our city council members got on right after this when he was still in jail. But they allowed, everything was virtual at this point, right, because of COVID. So their meetings, virtual, it's here. Ben Crump's right in the middle of this meeting for whatever reason, city council meeting. And Jessica Green, who is over our public safety for city council, she gets on there and says, well, Kenneth Walker's a hero for what he did. He shouldn't be in jail. A week later, he's released and charges dropped.
And so you go through that in the book, and I think this is on May 21st, if my memory.
Something like that, yeah.
Is the day you're in Portland, Oregon, and you get a call.
It was in April when I found that out. I think it may have been May. Yeah, May.
You're in Portland, Oregon, though. I think when you get a call and they're telling you that there will be no charges against Kenneth Walker. How tell us that story and how did you feel?
So they dropped the charges twice, okay? The first time when they dropped him and let him out of jail, I got a call from the assistant Commonwealth attorney, which is our DA. Assistant Commonwealth attorney calls me and says, man, I hate to tell you this, we're gonna drop the charges, but we're gonna come back and charge him. We're just getting more evidence. We're trying to get in this phone, we're trying to get more statements. I promise we're gonna come back and charge him. And I thought, no, you're not. But okay, I'll play your game, that's cool. Not happy about it, but again, I can also play devil's advocate and go, maybe for some weird reason he didn't hear us say police. Whatever. If that's the case, that's the case. And we'll live with it. So, but I was a little dejected, right? Because I'm like, man, this sucks. The guy who shot me is now out, and he's already been labeled a hero. Then, about a month later, I think it was, or I don't remember the exact timeline, I didn't get a call this time. I saw it on social media that the charges were now changed to dropped with without prejudice, which means they can never come back and charge him for shooting me again. And I'm thinking, wow. But then I heard a podcast with Kenneth Walker's attorney, Steve Romines. And he said on there that he included the Commonwealth attorney, Tom Wine, who is since deceased, in there and said he sued him as part of it for whatever reason, included him in the lawsuit, and it was allowed, because what's the Commonwealth attorney have anything to do with that night shooting? Makes no sense. Anyway, he said, I told Tom Wine, if you drop the charges permanently on Kenneth Walker, I will take you out of this lawsuit. He said, and the day before the time was up to take him out of the lawsuit, that's when they dropped the charges. He said, and I took him off the lawsuit.
So I want to play this video of how celebrities and influencers hopped on board with all of this. And I think this Tamika Mallory, who was raised up, developed, cultivated by Al Sharpton, she gets involved. And next thing you know, Alicia Keys and Oprah Winfrey and Cardi B, and everybody is promoting this narrative on Breonna Taylor. Let's play that video.
Do you know what happened to Breonna Taylor?
I am Tamika Palmer. I am the mother of Breonna Taylor.
Three officers on the Louisville Metro Police Department used a battering ram to knock down her door. They fired 22 times. 8 of those bullets landed in the body of the most essential worker I will ever know. Bree was murdered by the Louisville Metro Police Department. And after they killed her, they asked me if she had any enemies. No, absolutely not.
This story started coming out differently, and people started learning the truth of what was happening and the things that went wrong that night. Now the whole city is mad. Now the whole world is mad. Breonna should not be dead. Some days I feel like I can't breathe without her. This should never happen to another family. I am Breonna Taylor's mother. Say her name.
Now that we know what happened to Breonna Taylor, it is time for us to act and to get justice for her and her family. There are few things that you can do no matter where you are in this country. The first thing is call Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher and demand that he fire the officers responsible for murdering Breonna Taylor. Number 2, call the Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron and demand that he charge the officers who are responsible for murdering Breonna Taylor. Next, call the interim police chief, Robert Schroeder, and tell him to finish his investigation and immediately turn over the details to Breonna's lawyers and also to the Attorney General. And now, Louisville residents, the power is in your hands. Breonna Taylor's family has said that they are not just fighting for her, but they're fighting to ensure that what happened to Breonna never happens again. There's a vote in your town this week. Call your council members and let them know that you demand that they vote to ban no-knock warrants.
Do you know what happened to Breonna Taylor? Do you know what happened to Breonna Taylor?
These celebrities that hop on board with this stuff do no research, aren't journalists, aren't interested in truth, don't obviously care about you or anybody else they put in harm's way. But this stuff is just very dangerous.
Yeah.
And it has real impact. And I don't want to, I just want to deal with the facts. I don't want to Tamika Palmer, Breonna's mother, losing a child. My audience knows this, but I had a relative that I helped raise who was killed by law enforcement in Indianapolis in 2012. I know the pain that this causes, and I'm sympathetic towards Tamika Palmer. But the reality is that you and your family and these other officers had credible death threats by motorcycle gangs in the Louisville area that are connected to Tamika Palmer.
So she's part of a motorcycle gang. There's Sin City and No Haters, two of the more violent black motorcycle gangs in Louisville. They're known for dealing drugs, violence, selling guns. And apparently they called in Sin City, a group from Chicago to come in. They brought them in. Yeah, it was Sin City. They brought them in, and one of the informants was actually at the meeting where they come in. She described the vehicles they came in. It was a Durango, a Taurus, and 3 motorcycles. Came down from Chicago. They have this meeting at their clubhouse. They exchange money and say how they're gonna kill us. So June 5th is Breonna's birthday, was her 26th birthday. They were having a balloon release and they wanted something to celebrate. This informant said they wanted something to celebrate more than just her birthday. They wanted the death of one of the officers, or if they couldn't get the officers, one of their family members. And so this was corroborated by 2 informants for sure, maybe a third one, but 2 for sure. One was a federal informant, one was a local informant. They didn't know each other. They come with the same story. They come with the same people. And so the FBI took over it. And I thought, well, great, the FBI's got this. At that time in my mind, before we knew all this other stuff, I'm thinking the leading investigative agency in the world, the most resources, I'm glad they have it. And I still think they're capable of all that. I just think, unfortunately, the top's guided them in misdirections. But when they took it, I thought, well, good, they have it. But then we were moved out of our house in the middle of the night on May 31st. And we had to go a couple hours away. The city wouldn't put us up. I take it back. They offered to put us up in the middle of downtown at a hotel because they had a agreement with them for a better price. Right where 7 people had just been shot, right where people were carrying my photo around saying they want to kill us and we're murderers and all this. And I was like, no, thank you. So I'm calling around. I find a place. We go a couple hours away with my entire family at 2:30 in the morning. And it was so surreal. It was like a movie scene. This line of police unmarked cars taking us to a hidden location. And again, the department never once reached out and said, man, is there anything you need? Is there anything you help? Financially, is there anything you need? Are you paying rent at this place? What's going on? Never, not one time. They didn't even want to give us security. But fortunately, another friend of mine, Tom Chardine, who ran Dignitary Protection, wrote up this good letter, basically where they had to cover their tails, because it was like, look, these threats, they're credible, and you're refusing to give them any security. You're going to be held liable. And so they went, okay, we'll give each of them one person. So we had some bodies on us for a while, for protection. But yeah, just the surrealness of it. And then after about 10, 11 days into this FBI investigation, they totally closed the case, said the optics looked bad going after a black national victim's mother. So they weren't going to pursue it.
So you and the other 2 officers that fired shots that night, are you guys now completely out of harm's way as it relates to the legal system?
No, the guy who shot through the outside, and let me explain that because people have a hard time with that. And I did it initially too. Yeah. When I saw the photos and stuff, I'm like, man, why did he do that? So I met with him maybe 2 months later, and we were all coworkers, but none of the 3 of us were friends that hung out outside of work. We just knew each other through work. And so I talk to him more now than I did then. And I had lunch with him like, Brett, man, can you explain to me why you did what you did? Because I'm confused too. That's not our training. That's not protocol. That's not normal. He said, man, he was the 3rd one coming in behind me in the stack. Okay, so I'm first in. Miles, the second guy who shot right over my right shoulder. As I turn that corner and I get shot, I return fire. I go back and I grab my leg and I said, I've been hit. I even looked at Mike, who's the breacher. He got trapped in the doorway underneath the staircase, and I said, dude, I've been hit my femoral. And by that time, I'm down, and Miles is shooting over top of me. Well, Brett said he saw the initial flash and heard me say I've been hit. Well, he can't get in the doorway because there's already 2 of us there. So you can't have a third guy, poking over. He said, so I button hooked around the front. He said, and as I'm going around, I just hear pop, 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 pop. And in his mind, even unseen, in his mind, he thought they had a long rifle. Because I remember when I'm on my back and they're adjusting the tourniquet, doing whatever, and he's on the radio, he said, radio, they've got a long rifle inside, get a SWAT out here. And I remember yelling to him saying, no, Brett, it was a silver handgun. Because I didn't see a rifle. Maybe my field of vision didn't go all the way left. I stopped when I saw the gun. Maybe there was one, maybe there wasn't. They did find casings inside of 223 from an AR. He's got photos on his Facebook of holding an AR. Kenneth Walker. So Brett said when he circled around, he heard these multiple shots. And we're in this little echo chamber here, right? Underneath these with concrete and metal. So everything is just loud and echoing. He said as he turned that corner, he thought we were getting executed at the doorway, and he was going to do anything he could to get the person inside who he thought had a rifle to quit shooting us. And that's why he fired through the windows. And unfortunately for him, I appreciate him because he risked his career, risked his freedom to save, or thought he was saving me, thought I was getting gunned down at the doorway, went outside of the box to do that. And now he went to state trial for wanton endangerment, was acquitted in less than an hour after our heavily Democratic city with jurors of mixed race heard it and went, oh, there's the facts, never mind, innocent. As he's rejoicing in that, the feds walk behind him in court and say it's not over. And they go and they charge him federally for the same crime, plus they added civil rights violations, which is life in prison if he's convicted, for hitting no one. Drywall, glass. He didn't shoot Breonna. None of his bullets hit her. And so he's looking at that. We went to trial on that last year. It was a hung jury, 10 to acquit, 2 for guilty, and they're recharging him. We've got trial coming up in October on that. But myself and Miles, the 2 initially at the door, were cleared.
What are all 3 of you doing now? I would imagine you're off law force. What are you doing now?
I'm traveling the country. I'm able to speak to law enforcement agencies and conferences and even some private events, giving them a debrief on this so the truth gets out. This isn't a woe is me tour. This isn't me coming on here going, oh, feel sorry for John. This is me waving the red flag to the American public saying, hey, 2 things. Number one, when an incident happens, let the cake bake. Wait till the truth comes out before your judgment kicks in. But also to the leaders of these agencies going, stand up, man. If the guys are doing what you train them to do, what you ask them to do, what you equip them to do, and then they do it and things go sideways, why are you turning your back on them? Have the courage, even if your mayor doesn't want you to, even if it might cost you your job, back up your guys, because the more we don't back up these officers who are doing the right thing, the worse policing is going to continue to get in America. The standards are getting lowered. Nobody wants the job. Like you said, you wouldn't do it. I don't know if I'd want my kids doing it, but we need good police in society or it's just going to be chaos. And I hope the end goal isn't that the standards are so low that policing becomes so corrupt that the government comes in with the national police to take over. Because that's what it feels like it's heading.
It's definitely where it's headed.
And it's a total setup from the top down.
And it's such a rejection of our Constitution. States are supposed to be most powerful, not the federal government.
Right. But that's what you see with these consent decrees. Man, they're all, I read the consent decree for Louisville that the DOJ put out their findings. So many lies in that thing, and they can just get away with it. Even on the cases that, well, they had this many complaints of use of force. Okay, well, show us the 90% that were clear, justified because of body cam that you wanted, that you now have, that justified these use of forces, but you're still including them in this DOJ investigation saying Louisville police are corrupt. And in some of the cases, guys were indicted, went to prison. Okay, justice was done in those cases because we held them accountable. So why is that now being held against the department later down the road so the feds can come in and control things? But they skew the numbers, they lie, and there's no accountability there.
John, thank you so much for taking the time. I enjoyed the conversation. I hope that the audience did. We're going to stay on this conversation just about from Breonna Taylor to all of these high-profile cases, Central Park 5 to this to George Floyd, they're all hoaxes, and they're driving our country off a cliff. They're making all of us less safe. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you having me, Jason. Thank you.
We'll play some tomorrow, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Waiting for the countdown, coming off the breakdown, standing in line for freedom. Looking for a breakout, feeling like a standoff, nothing in life like freedom. Came like a fighter, striking like a ladder, making all these moves for freedom. I want freedom. No negotiation, my sister, no relation. We all just wanna have freedom. Sitting on a corner, never been alone. I'm breaking my back for freedom. Blessed, we are living, get back. We are receiving, no deceiving. We all wanna be free. We want freedom. I just want